Martijn Graat and this is Does Logistics Matter? A podcast on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics. Answering yes to the question today is Marcel Merkx, founder and CEO of Cargosnap. On this episode, we talk about proof of condition and why warehouses have no windows. Please enjoy my conversation with Marcel Merkx. Marcel, welcome to the show. The first question, does logistics matter?
Oh, it does. Sure does.
That's good to hear. Then you're definitely on the right show.
Cool.
You're obviously in logistics. How did you get there?
It's been a journey. I've been around for about 20 years now in my professional career. As a physicist in the 90s, I started in an IT job, like many of my fellow students did. I joined Alcoa, aluminium producer, and I stayed in the IT organization for about 7 years. And at one point in time, I had this itch, this feeling that I'm working for this aluminium producer for 7 years and I don't get to see a bit of that metal. Can I get, and I asked I remember asking my boss, can I get a bit closer to the business? And he mentioned there was this 6 months project in logistics, if I would be interested. And at the time, I remember saying, I know nothing of logistics, so let's give it a try. Well, the 6 months became 13 years, and it's been incredibly sticky. I really enjoy working in logistics as much as I did in IT, by the way. But it's fascinating to work in logistics because it's really, really diverse. And what I particularly like about logistics is that when you go into a particular niche or a particular area, people really love what they're doing and they love to talk about it. They love to share about it. There's a lot of technicalities to it. It's not always easy for an outsider to really understand what we're doing, but people love to talk about it and try to induce people into what they're doing. So I've been able to learn a heck of a lot from all of the people I've worked with over those years. That has brought me, in terms of my knowledge, where I'm at today. Today, as the founder and CEO of Cargosnap, that's a little mini story by itself. But at one point in time in my career, I decided I wanted to take the learnings that I had from my IT career and those of the logistics career and really try to find a kind of that crossing point of those two realms and help companies in logistics with their IT problems, and that's where Cargosnap was kind of born.
So what problem did you see, and what was the solution?
Great question. Well, in fact, the actual sort of the pivotal moment that Cargosnap came about was actually I was recommended to speak with a company, actually it's Eurorhine in Moerdijk. Was recommended by a shipbroker that both of us knew. And I remember driving to Moerdijk where we were going to meet about loading and discharging operations of ferrosilicons. Now, I'm pretty versed in metal handling, but actually I realized driving there that I really don't know much about ferrosilicon at all. And very clearly, very early on in the conversation with the team there, it was clear that they do know. I mean, I did not need to worry about knowing exactly what ferrosilicon is about. And I think that's a theme in logistics that I think is really important to come back to later on as well. But at that moment in time, they were really interested in taking a next step in terms of informing their customers of situations where maybe there was a complaint that they would receive or there was some doubts about the quality of particular cargo. And in order to satisfy the customer demands around information, they were looking for a solution somewhere around, can we take pictures and kind of add that to our files? And I remember driving back home, where I was kind of pretty confident that, I'll just sit down, I'll Google it. I'll Google that solution that undoubtedly already exists, and then I'll take that back and implement it with them and, make that a very successful project. Well, I did get home and I did start to search on the internet, and much to my surprise, I couldn't find it. I just could not find the solution that dealt with this problem. And what was truly baffling to me is this question that came up from Eurorhine. I could completely relate to it from my own career at Alcoa. I've seen so many cases where certain information needs to be kind of uncovered and shared with others. So that made me kind of sure that a solution would exist. Well, as it turned out, it did not exist. I decided to make another switch in my kind of career and go from more like a consulting, informational kind of approach towards customers to a product. So that's essentially how Cargosnap was born. We identified that there was a specific customer with a specific need. Eurorhine was fantastic, certainly as a launching customer. They adopted that idea where I said, okay, let's build a product, because we see that you need it. They were fantastic in giving feedback as we developed our product and through our prototype to a live product. And we took our product and our website live in January 2017, and it's been a fantastic journey since then. But that's kind of how we were born.
When you look at these problems that companies face when they are shipping things or when they are receiving things, I always link it to when I get a package myself and the box is dented. Mm-hmm. Now, are you is it complaint handling or is there a broader issue?
Right. Perfect question. Yeah, I think it's a lot broader. You can really take it from kind of the fundamentals of supply chain management. Pretty broad approach there. But if you think of that as a theoretic approach, in a theory, a supply chain is lots and lots of companies working together one by one to optimize their total supply chain. And supply chains compete with other supply chains, right? So it's the car manufacturers all have their own supply chains behind it. So you're competing with each other. Well, the reality is, although the textbook says that supply chains compete with each other, I now and then see that even within a supply chain, there are forces at work. And particularly the role of logistics service provider, be it a warehouse or be it a terminal or a carrier, it isn't necessarily the strongest player in the supply chain. At the end of the day, it's the cargo owner or the final consumer that really holds the power in the supply chain. And the thing is, when things do go wrong, you mentioned the dented box. What happens in the supply chain is what I'd like to call the hot potato game. There's a problem and everybody in the supply chain just tries to pass it on to the previous partner in the supply chain.
Yeah.
And in fact, what very often happens, and certainly in the situation where there's a bit of lack of information, unfortunately, that hot potato will land with the weakest player in the market. The player that doesn't have a financial leverage, that doesn't really play a decisive role in the chain, and they end up handling or remaining with that claim. Now, if you take that situation, then you could say, well, maybe Cargosnap is then focused on that claim management. But I believe that our solution in that is actually taking that step back and say, well, given that those supply chains need to be managed as a supply chain, as a chain of events, and with multiple companies work together. And given that supply chains have really changed a lot over the past decades, inventories and safety stocks have all disappeared. And when things do go wrong, and things do go wrong all the time, of course, but when things do go wrong, you need to really act and react to that situation. And everybody in the supply chain needs to be informed. So things can be rescheduled, can be reproduced, can be reordered in a timely fashion and not at the very, very last moment in time. So, the good old inventory has been replaced with information. Now, that information has been replaced in a lot of sense in terms of, I always envision spreadsheets with lines of orders, quantities, estimated time of delivery, the actual delivery, and, line by line. And supply chain partners are sharing that throughout the supply chains. They're scheduling and rescheduling based on the information flow. But because our end consumer is getting more and more demanding, supply chains are getting more and more, pulled by that final consumer. In your last podcast with Peter van der Broeke, I think it really came out very nicely with that fulfillment. The same day kind of delivery. People expect, their expectations are increasing ever. What we need to do is to increase also the level of control that is being exerted onto supply chain. So replacing those spreadsheets. Now, those spreadsheets and that data is there to stay, but we're enriching that, for example, with photos of data, scans of documents, inspections that are being performed, where maybe there's a bit of subjective information that can be used as input between supply chain partners. And that really is our vision in terms of helping logistics companies and supply chain orchestrators in general. So we believe that you need to have a lot of that visual information, and we want to make it really, really easy to handle that situation. So, thinking of the case of something going wrong, it may be illustrative if you get a photo of a damaged package, but if in fact you don't actually know what's the normal routine of handling that package, how did the other 999 similar packages actually get handled? And where did this particular situation go wrong?
Yeah.
You're not learning, and you're just handling that claim, and you're putting a responsibility of somebody, and everybody's kind of passing that hot potato, which is effectively the financial claim, onto the chain, but you're not learning. So what we really believe in is that every aspect of the supply chain, the way of handling cargo and equipment, needs to be recorded in an efficient way. And of course, you don't want to burden logistics personnel with significant effort, right? So you need to balance that data collection effort with the amount of time that you want to spend on it and the amount of data that you can derive from it. And that's really where we play a role, is we want to enable logistics companies to have their logistics staff record things in the flow of the process. A container comes in, you open the doors, and people have their mobile phones with them anyway. So quickly take them out, take a picture, perform a short inspection, and share that immediately with the customer, and share that when things are conforming the expectations and when they're non-conforming.
It's what we do in our daily lives as well, where everybody is always on their phone and they're looking at rich information. There's video, there's pictures. They take pictures of things.
Yeah.
They use WhatsApp to report things. But then again, it's still a picture, which is in a WhatsApp group. But where is the file?
Yeah.
So how have you solved that?
Yeah, definitely. We do compare ourselves now and then with WhatsApp, and what we like to say is we're the WhatsApp of logistics, because we are actually taking some of that idea of this omnipresence of the mobile phone and the quick ability to take a picture and share it with somebody. We definitely support that, but we structure it, and we structure it in such a way that everything gets stored, under a file that a logistics company is already used to doing. Everybody has their file. Everybody has their WMS, TMS systems that will say, well, this is the reference for this particular shipment. Well, we will connect into that reference, and everything that pertains to that shipment will be stored under that reference. So, later on people can easily find it, and it can be shared with the relevant information, the relevant company in the supply chain that's interested in that particular order. I think that's where the expectations of people are. I want more and more of that type of data. And we see companies that are trying to find their way, and they're using what I'll call WhatsApp improvisation, in combination with with digital cameras, which are eventually wired to computers, to provide that experience. And we try to really take a lot of that burden away. That's so very often what people actually first see or think they see when they look at Cargosnap is taking that burden of the data and information collection away. But we believe, and that I think is also your point, is we believe in much more enriching that data. So beyond that picture that you're taking of that container, what we're trying to do is to really create what we lovingly call a proof of condition. It is evidence. It is evidence that contains not just that photograph, but it contains the place, the time, the person that took that inspection. It may contain, we may enrich it with, for example, weather information and other kinds of data that really create a total package of information to say, well, there's this paper product and it was in fact discharged in this particular port on this particular day, and in fact it was dry. So those are really important parts that really enrich that. When you look at that photograph, you need to know those kind of circumstances around it. And that's what we call a proof of condition. Much thinking of the term of a proof of delivery, which is kind of that final step in the supply chain, the very, very last step. We really believe in if you want to orchestrate a supply chain, you need to know the condition of the various stages of the materials and cargo, but also equipment, throughout that supply chain over time, and that's a proof of condition.
So on the one hand, it protects also the parties in the supply chain, because if something goes wrong, you can find where it goes wrong.
Yep.
And I think you also already said that, it's nice when the claim comes at the right position, that the person that made the error has to pay for it.
Yep.
But I guess another point that is much more important that you said is for supply chains, or for the shipper and the owner of the product, to know where it went wrong, so the next time it goes right.
Right.
So every step in the supply chain learns.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we see it all the time with our customer base, but I also had an experience from my previous career. At the end of the day, who pays the bill, it has got a really good steering factor. If it turns out that in a supply chain things get broken at a particular point in the supply chain, people start to optimize it because they want to fend off the claims. And what we help, what I believe in supply chains do most efficiently, is to make sure that the claim actually lands at the right party with the right amount of information, i.e. to actually understand what went wrong and what were the conditions under which things did go wrong. I mentioned a little bit earlier how people have their own expertise, right? And my expertise may have come from handling metals. Well, we have customers now that are doing, if it's pharmaceuticals or fruit or rocks of various types or paper. Whenever we speak with people in that business, when they look at a product, if you've been handling mangoes for 20 years and you're looking at a mango, you're looking at a mango in a totally different way than I would do, right? And these people that have so much knowledge about this, they can look at the picture and tell a whole story about what has happened with this particular product. And so visualizing it and bringing it to the party or the place where things go wrong is the absolute way of improving supply chains and making the supply chain much more competitive in terms of being able to avoid situations from happening.
Yeah, and what I also see is that both consumers and companies, there's a much higher demand for information. I mean, we're used to being informed all day, and I guess it gets into some kind of addiction. So you want more and more and more information. Yeah. I guess that's why in supply chains there's an increase in proactive information being shared instead of the traditional reactive response.
Totally. Yeah, we see that a lot. We see that actually that's a journey in supply chains in general, but we also see it within each of the companies that we work with. Many companies come in to try and optimize those data collection processes, and then they figure out that it's actually relatively easy to share information with the customer. And a very typical, it's not the singular journey, but a typical journey that people may take is receiving a lot of data, and then there's somebody in the office that actually, imagine a warehouse, and there's a warehouse office, and they're actually looking at the data, and when they're entirely content with the data, they may share it with their customer.
Yeah.
What we're more and more seeing is where warehouses are then asking, well, can't I just automatically share it with our customers? Because warehouses and generally logistics operations are very, very efficient by nature. They're not very transparent. I mean, warehouses don't have windows, right? It's not a very transparent business, but actually that just happened to be. But when you really go into confident logistics operations, our customers have no problem sharing everything they do with their customer, showing the state of the cargo, the state of the equipment with their customers. So what we're trying to facilitate more and more for those customers is, something comes in and it already notifies your final client, bypassing the office and just saying, hey client, your product has arrived. This is what it looks like. And as product leaves the facility, again, there's information is being flown, is being sent to the final customer. So people are making that journey from first kind of owning that data and looking at it to saying, hey, it's much more efficient to just go and share it.
Okay, so looking at this building without any windows, which always gets my heart beating faster because I'm a warehousing guy. I just if there's high walls and no windows, that gets me curious. I want to know what goes on inside. I want to see how everything's moving. So how does this work in a live operation?
Yeah,
the truck docks. The doors open and then
great question again. And it's a variable answer, because when the door opens and it's just full of boxes, you'll probably need to do something different than when it's full of big bags with agricultural products.
Yeah.
So here, what's really important is to acknowledge and realize that the person who opens the container or who opens the truck, this is the warehouse operator, the warehouse foreman, maybe a forklift driver. They are the ones that are actually at the physical goods. We can talk a lot about the theories of global supply chains and inventory disappearing and being replaced by information and spreadsheets. But at the end of the day, there's this guy, right? It's typically a guy. I'll say that should change, but that's probably a different topic for another podcast at one point in time. But it's a guy, and they open up the container and they see something. And what we really believe in is that we need to empower that person to collect the right information at the right time. And so, for example, in our product, we allow our companies to create workflows that are dependent on, let's say that are linked to a particular flow or to a particular commodity, if you like. So if you're interested in inspecting, I gave the example of mangoes, you probably need to identify if there are certain types of spots on the fruit. Then you can get the app to ask that question. Whereas if that container actually contains limes, you would not ask that same question, but probably a bunch of other questions.
Okay, clear.
Yeah, so what we try to do and facilitate for our customers is that we help that warehouse person to collect the right information with the minimum amount of effort. But besides our product, I think this is really, really true for supply chains in general, where well-equipped and well-trained warehouse staff knows their commodity. They know what to pay attention to, and they start to document the state of cargo and equipment at that moment in time. And that manifests itself in many ways. We see a lot of operations that are using like digital cameras or mobile phones, in some cases tablets, which, by the way, we don't really like because they're not so portable.
No.
When asked, I always recommend phones. But it's all about consistency in process. I gave the example before. If you have a damage at one point in time, what you need to know and need to show to a customer is that damage is an exception to a rule. And that rule is every time I get a container with a particular commodity, every time I inspect it in the same way, I demonstrate to my customer that I do that inspection, right? And that is effectively what I think is the way to do it in the warehouse. Now, warehouses need to be really efficient. Staff needs to be really efficient. They can't be spending a heck of a lot of time collecting that data, right? The truck or container needs to be discharged or loaded, so that's where the focus of that personnel needs to go in. So it's really onto the logistics, let's say engineering part of the logistics company to make sure that process is as complete as possible in terms of collecting data while having the least kind of footprint in terms of amount of effort for that operator. And by the way, I think what's also important to know is that those operators may not even speak the language that's spoken in the country, right? In the warehouse, you may have workers from other places. It may be really diverse. So, and your work, your staff may change over time. So you get new people coming in and leaving all the time. So but still you want to have consistency of processes. So there's quite a burden on logistics companies to really get it right. And that's where I think it's really important to standardize on workflows and processes, which we help our customers to achieve.
In speaking to your customers, there must be some weird or exciting or strange things that go wrong or go right in these processes. Do you have a story that you can share?
Yeah, I think everybody has their share of stories in supply chains on what may and may not happen. In fact, actually, most of the stories that we hear are pretty normal. They're like, something is damaged and we received a claim and we were immediately able to respond to it, showing it a picture that the cargo left in good order. So this is the norm. But definitely there are more extreme cases. The thing that comes in mind is a Brazilian client of ours who are loading containers to be shipped overseas. And at one point in time, they received a visit from the federal police who had just stopped a container in the port which was packed with drugs. And so everything gets bombarded in, blockaded off, and this warehouse is now under suspicion. And they were able to show not just that particular container that was being loaded that ended up full of drugs, but that they could show that every single container that they are loading is loaded in the same and consistent way, including this particular container. They were able to quickly demonstrate and get the feds off their backs, if you like, to say, well, it wasn't us. Have a look at what happened later on in the process. Well, it turned out, indeed, the process was that the truck driver drove off to some other place where the container was opened up, with seal and all. The doors were taken out and the cargo had been replaced. So that I would say is a pretty spectacular way, and it was really fun for us and exciting for us to have that customer come back really proudly saying they used Cargosnap in the defense towards the feds, and the feds complimented them for their structured data collection of that case. So that's a case I'm particularly proud of.
Oh, that's a great story, Marcel. I'd like to thank you for sharing all this knowledge and information.
It's a pleasure. It's great talking to you, Martijn.
Thank you for listening to Does Logistics Matter? For more on trends and innovations in supply chain and logistics, visit our blog on logisticsmatter.com. This podcast was produced by Dimitri Vleugel. The music is based on a sample by Ruggerman and produced by Michael Spengler. This episode was supported by Cargosnap. Cargosnap is the logistics app for logistics people. Cargosnap's mobile phone app makes collecting and sharing photos, checklists, and documents really simple. Its flexible workflow and form builder will help you speed up and improve your processes. For more information, please visit cargosnap.com.